wind came down hard off the caprock that morning, sharp as a blade and colder than the night had been. It moved across the flat, hard ground with a sound like sandpaper on bone pulling grit into the air and scouring the dying grass. Out by the fence line, 3 of the widow's 4 children stood in a huddle near the woodpile, their faces turned from the wind hands buried in threadbare sleeves. The youngest was crying, not loud, but in a way that got under the skin like something wounded in the brush. Inside the house, the widow leaned against the stove, eyes fixed on the iron door, as if the fire inside might tell her what to do next. The kettle had boiled dry. She hadn't noticed. Her dress hung off her like wet cloth, and the skin beneath her collarbone showed blue. One boot was untied. The room was small, just a square of boards and chinking, but the silence inside it was heavy like a punishment. A cracked cup sat on the table, half full of yesterday's coffee. The curtain over the window was pinned back, letting in the light, but there was no warmth in it. Her husband had been dead 10 days. A broken neck and a crushed spine under a collapsed beam at the west barn. It had taken nearly a full day to dig his body out and another to haul him back in a cart meant for fence rails. No doctor, no preacher, just the neighbor boy and the 2 oldest boys, their hands shaking as they pulled the rope that lowered him into the hole. They hadn't asked if she wanted to say anything. There hadn't been anything to say. Outside, the wind snapped the wash line clean. The sheet flew like a ghost across the yard before catching on the bare-limbed tree at the edge of the property. The children didn't move. They were used to things being taken. She stepped away from the stove and crossed the room to the cupboard. Inside was a 1/4 sack of flour, 2 potatoes soft with eyes, and half a jar of lard. She ran her finger down the glass like she was measuring time. Her hand trembled. She braced it against the shelf to steady it. The baby started crying in the next room. She didn't go to him right away. Instead, she pressed her forehead to the cupboard door and let her eyes close. Her mind floated backward, slipping out of the dry present into something softer, the first summer they'd come west, when the night still smelled like green grass and the creek had not yet dried to a trickle. He had carried her across the water the first time they crossed it, boots slung over one shoulder, laughing at how she yelped when the cold hit her legs. She remembered the weight of his arms and how the world had felt full then, like it might be enough. But the land had turned against them slowly then, all at once. No rain, no herd. One child, then another. Sickness. Long silences. And then that last morning, the sound of timber splitting and a silence that had not ended since. The baby wailed again. Her body moved without thought now, half instinct, half exhaustion. She picked him up and pressed his face into her neck, her hand cupping the back of his skull. His breath was fast hot. He smelled of milk gone sour. He stopped crying. A shadow passed across the front window. She stilled ears, straining against the wind. There it was again. A figure moving slow across the rise, headed toward the house. Horseback. Alone. She set the baby down in the basket and reached for the rifle by the door. Her palms were wet. She checked the chamber with fingers that didn't feel like hers, then stepped onto the porch. The man pulled up a good 20 feet from the door, his hat pulled low, coat dark with dust. He didn't speak right away. Didn't move either. Just let the horse settle, steam rising from its back into the cold. "What do you want?" she asked. His voice came low and even. "I saw your chimney smoking." She raised the rifle slightly. "That don't mean come in." He nodded like he understood. "You got 4 kids." Her breath caught just a little. "You been watching?" "No. Just saw the tracks. Small feet. Fresh." She looked past him, out toward the road. No wagon. No pack mule. Just a man with worn boots and a horse too tired to run. He didn't look armed, but she'd been fooled before. "I got nothing for you," she said. He dismounted without answering, slow and careful. His left leg buckled slightly when he hit the ground. He caught the saddle to steady himself, winced, then straightened. "I'll go," he said. "Just need a place to warm up before I do." She didn't answer. "I'll stay out here." Still, she said nothing. Then, as the wind tore again across the yard, carrying dust and dry leaves and something older than both, she stepped back inside without a word and left the door open behind her. He waited a full minute before stepping through the doorway, hat in hand. The wind slammed the door shut behind him like it meant to keep him in or keep the cold out. It was hard to tell which. The man stood just inside the threshold, hat pressed against his chest, eyes adjusting to the dim light. The widow didn't look at him. She was spooning a gray mash of flour and water into a skillet on the stove, moving like a machine that didn't much care if it ran or not. The room smelled of smoke and cold ash. The baby had gone quiet again, sucking on his fist in the basket by the hearth. The man kept his hand's visible thumb resting on the brim of his hat, the other on the buckle of his belt. "Didn't mean to frighten you," he said. "You didn't." Her voice was flat, tired. "There's no sugar, no salt neither. I'm not hungry." "Then why are you here?" He looked down at the floorboards, scarred and warped from years of wood dragged across them, then back up at her. "Truth is, I was looking for a man named Weller. Fella told me he had a place out this way. Offered me a few days' pay if I could fix a roof and mend a gate. Said he had a family, 4 kids. She didn't stop stirring. Her jaw clenched, though. "He's dead," she said. The man lowered his gaze. "I see. 10 days now. Gates still broke. Roof too, food. I can be gone by nightfall." She nodded, though her face didn't change. The skillet hissed. She flipped the lump of dough with a fork and let it brown. "I don't have your pay," she said after a while. He rubbed his chin with the back of his hand. "Didn't figure you did." Silence stretched again. He crossed to the corner and sat slowly in the rickety chair by the table, careful not to make noise. His legs stiffened and he winced again, this time not bothering to hide it. The pain was deep, old, likely the kind that never quite left. The oldest boy came in through the back door, cheeks red from the wind. He froze when he saw the stranger, one hand still gripping the rusted handle of a bucket. "It's fine," the widow said without turning. The boy didn't answer, just narrowed his eyes and set the bucket down hard enough to slosh water onto the floor. He stood there waiting, jaw clenched the same way his mother's had been. The resemblance was sharp. The stranger nodded to him. "What's your name?" the boy asked. "Call me Rise." The boy didn't respond, just looked to his mother for a cue. She nodded once. The boy stepped out again, boots stomping harder than they needed to. "Good boy," Riz said quietly. "He's tired," she said. "We all are." He didn't say anything to that. She slid the skillet off the stove and scraped the bread onto a cracked plate, then placed it on the table in front of him. "No butter." "No plate for herself." Rise hesitated. "You sure?" She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Eat or don't." He did. Ate, slow, careful not to act like it was good, even though it was the kind of good that came only after going without. The heat of it filled the hollows under his ribs, spread slow through his limbs. He didn't close his eyes, just kept his attention on the plate. "Where you from?" she asked. He chewed, swallowed. "South of Amarillo. Ranch work mostly. A bit of fence, a bit of trail. What happened to your leg?" "Horse rolled on me. Couple years back. Never quite healed right." "You have people?" "No." She nodded like she already knew. The baby stirred. She moved to him with practiced ease, picked him up, held him close. Riz watched her, not in the way of a man admiring a woman, but like someone trying to remember what softness looked like. Why'd you really stop? She asked. He looked at her then. Something passed across his face, too quick to name but not small. Couldn't ride past, he said simply. That it? He looked down at his hands, the calluses like old bark. That's it. She stood silent for a while, shifting the baby from one hip to the other. Then, without looking at him, she said, "Roof's gone soft over the east room. Water'll come through if it snows again. I can fix that. You'll need the ladder. It's in the barn." He pushed back from the table, stood. The leg protested again, but he didn't let it show this time. His hat was still in his hand. He looked at it then, at her. "You keep that bread," she said. "You'll need it." He nodded once, then stepped out into the wind. The horizon is wide, subscribe and see what waits beyond it. The barn door groaned like it didn't want to open, its hinges swollen from last week's freeze. Riz shoved it with his shoulder and stepped inside. Dust hung in the slatted light like old breath. The roof sagged in the middle, same as the house. Smell of straw, manure, and damp wood soaked the air. He found the ladder buried behind a coil of dry wire in a split saddle tree. Its rungs were warped but whole. When he hoisted it to his shoulder, a mouse skittered out from under the pile, disappearing into shadow. He worked all morning. No one helped and no one offered to. That suited him fine. The cold and the wind meant he had to move fast or risk freezing through the coat. He stripped it off after an hour anyway, sweat soaking through his shirt. His hands stung from the nails. The hammer was dull. Shingles cracked if he swung too hard. By midday he'd cleared the soft rot and patched what he could. It wouldn't hold forever, but it might hold through spring. That was the kind of thing that mattered out here through spring. Nobody out this far talked in years. Only in seasons. He sat on the edge of the roof and drank from his canteen. Below him the yard stretched in brittle color. The youngest two kids were drawing lines in the dirt with sticks. Their coats were too thin. One of them laughed sharp and sudden, and it caught him by surprise. He couldn't remember the last time he'd heard a child laugh like that. He climbed down, slow, leg aching. When he reached the ground, the boy from earlier, the oldest, stood near the fence, arms folded tight. "You done?" Rise nodded. "Mostly. Needs more shingle than you've got." The boy kicked a rock. "Knew that. Your pa teach you any of it hammering?" "Mending." The boy stared him down. "I learned what I had to." "That ain't the same." The boy looked away. Rise turned toward the barn, meaning to return the ladder when the boy asked, "You staying?" "Don't know yet." "You fix the gate too?" "Plan to." "Why?" Rise looked him over, saw the way his jaw was set too hard for a boy of that age. 12 maybe. Or 13. Should been skinny from growing, not hunger. "Because your mother asked," Riz said. "She didn't." Riz smiled just a little. "No." But she didn't say no neither. Inside, the widow had swept the floor clean, or clean as it could get. There was a fire again, steady now. The baby lay swaddled in a quilt on the floor, eyes wide, hands twitching like he was chasing dreams only babies knew. The middle children sat at the table, mouths still back straight. One of them traced shapes into the dust on the wood. Rise stepped inside, set the hammer down quiet. She looked at him. "You eat?" "I'm fine. I made some stew." He looked at the pot. Couldn't smell much beyond boiled root and onion, but it was hot. And it was enough. He nodded, sat down again. The bowl she handed him was chipped. The spoon was bent. None of it mattered. The broth soaked into him like warmth returned from someplace forgotten. She didn't sit. Just leaned against the wall, arms crossed again. Her eyes stayed on the window this time, like she was watching the edge of the world. "You got a name?" she asked. "Riz is the one I kept. And the others?" "Left behind. Don't matter now." She nodded. He cleared the bowl and set it down soft. "Thank you." She didn't answer right away. Then that roof holed through the thought. If it doesn't snow heavy, it might. Good. He looked at her. Her face was harder up close, but not cruel. Just worn. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with prettiness. Something to do with how she stood, how she didn't flinch. "You got someone coming?" he asked. "Family." She shook her head. "My folks were buried back in Missouri. His family don't write. You can't stay out here alone. Not like this." "I am staying." He nodded once slow. "You got grit. Grit don't make firewood. Grit don't mend boots. Grit don't feed children. Sometimes it buys you just enough time to figure out what does." She looked at him then. A real look. Not curious. Not grateful. Just quiet. Like maybe she was measuring something about him she hadn't known she needed to. He didn't look away. Outside the wind was dying. The children had gone silent again. The sun low and red pressed against the rim of the hills. "You fix the gate tomorrow?" she said. "I will. You can sleep in the barn. I've had worse. Don't make noise in the morning. The baby wakes easy." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." And just like that they understood one another. Riz slept on a bed of old hay and saddle blankets, the barn roof groaning above him, each time the wind turned in its sleep. He lay on his back watching stars blink through the gaps in the wood. His breath curled up into the rafters and disappeared. The warmth from the stew held a while, but it didn't last. He'd known colder nights, but not many. His leg ached, steady now, bone deep, the kind of ache that spoke in pulses and made sleep hard. So he didn't chase it. He let the dark settle and listened to the horse shifting in its stall, to the quiet breathing of the world outside. Before dawn he was up again. His body moved stiffly slow with the kind of fatigue that came not from one day's labor but years of it. He rolled his shoulders, stretched the leg out until it gave that sharp jolt, then steadied. Outside the sky was pale as ash. No bird song, just wind whispering over the snow-slicked ground. He crossed the yard, quiet boots leaving prints that would vanish by noon. The tools were right where he'd left them. He set to work on the gate, first clearing the frozen hinge of rust, then resetting the latch so it wouldn't sag. The wood needed replacing, but he made do bracing it with what scraps he could find, reinforcing the weakest points with iron nails pulled from the shed wall. He worked through sunrise, the sky catching fire behind the bare trees. At some point the boy came to stand beside him again, hands in his coat pockets. He didn't speak this time, just watched. Rise handed him the hammer without a word. The boy took it, held it right, waited for instruction. They worked side by side until the gate moved clean on its hinge. It shut without dragging now. It latched true. "That'll hold, Riz," said, brushing the rust from his palms. The boy nodded, then asked, "You used to have a place?" Rise looked out toward the distant hills where the earth folded into itself like a secret. "I did." "What happened?" Riz studied the boy a moment. "Too much pride. Not enough rain." The boy seemed to understand. He looked at the gate again like it meant something more than just wood and nails. "You want to learn how to mend saddle leather?" Rise asked. The boy's eyes lifted. "Yes, sir. "Then bring it out. We'll start after sunup tomorrow." That night the widow said nothing when Riz stepped inside. She just nodded toward the bowl left for him at the table. A different stew, still thin but hotter. A slice of pan bread beside it. He ate slow, each bite like a step forward into something he couldn't quite name. The girl, middle child, no more than 7, climbed onto the bench across from him. She didn't speak either, just watched him eat, legs swinging. Her hair was tied back with twine. Her eyes were the color of creek mud, same as her mother's. "You got kids?" she asked. He shook his head. "No, miss." "Why not? No." He looked at her a moment, then said, "God didn't see fit, I suppose." She chewed her lip like she was thinking that over. "You can help with the horse. Mama says he's got stone in his hoof." "I can take a look." "She says he's mean." Riz smiled. "I've known worse." The girl smiled back. "Just a little." Then she slipped down and disappeared behind the curtain that hung across the bedroom door. Later, as Rise stood to leave, the widow followed him to the door. She didn't ask where he'd go, didn't tell him to be careful, just said, "I saw the gate." He nodded. "You're teaching him?" "He's ready." She hesitated, then said, "You don't talk like the others." "What others?" "The ones who came through after my husband died, looking for scrap, or worse. I'm not them." "No," she said, "you're not." She leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. He could see the hard edge in her starting to shift, not softening, just moving, like ice in spring. "I'll work the east fence tomorrow," he said. She nodded. "The south line too, if you've got it in you." "I do." She looked out toward the horizon. The moon was coming up thin and sharp. "You can stay," she said. "For now." He touched the brim of his hat. "For now." Then he turned and walked back to the barn. Inside, the horse shifted and the rafters whispered. He lay down again, this time warmer. The hay didn't scratch as much. His breath rose slow into the dark. And somewhere between waking and sleep, he felt something inside him, long buried and still begin to stir. Snow fell 2 days later. Not heavy, but steady, the kind that came without sound and blanketed everything in a clean white hush. The world outside the cabin slowed, hushed beneath the weight. Footprints vanished before you finished making them. Riz worked through it anyway. He wrapped his coat tighter, pulled a wool scarf high around his mouth, and kept to the fences. The east line was near the dry creek bed where the wind cut sharper. He set new posts where he could and lashed together the broken ones with wire from the shed. Each swing of the hammer rang dull in the air. The boy Nathaniel, the widow finally called him by name, trailed behind with a coil of rope over his shoulder and a small hatchet in his belt. He didn't complain. He didn't speak unless asked. Just watched, worked, and learned. Riz showed him how to brace a corner post using nothing but angle and instinct. How to test the tension of wire by the sound it gave when plucked. How to read a break before you saw it. "You got a good eye," Rise said once. Nathaniel didn't look up, just nodded like he already knew. By evening, Riz could barely feel his hands. The snow had soaked through his boots and his leg burned with the same familiar fire. But when they stepped back into the warmth of the house, steam rising from their shoulders, something small and silent passed between them. The widow was pulling bread from the oven. Real bread this time, dense, warm, with a crust that cracked under pressure. She didn't smile when she saw them, but she did pause. Her eyes lingered on the boy, on the snow in his hair, the smear of soot on his cheek. "You fed him?" she asked Rice. "Not yet. She handed the loaf to Nathaniel. "Then you feed him first." Nathaniel hesitated, looking at the bread like he didn't quite believe it. "Go on," she said. He tore it in half, handed the bigger piece to Riz without a word. Rise accepted it. "Thank you." They ate in silence, the kind that wasn't heavy anymore, just full. The other children watched, eyes wide but not afraid. Later, after the dishes were scrubbed and the fire stoked, Rise sat on the floor with the middle child, Lena. She handed him a tangle of leather reins, split through at the buckle. He took them carefully, laid them across his knee. "You tried to fix these already?" he asked. She nodded, proud. "I used a needle, but it broke." He ran his thumb along the stitching. "You were close. You just need a thicker thread." Saddle twine. Do you have some? Not yet. But I'll find it. She smiled and leaned her head against his arm. Her hair smelled of wood smoke and wind. The widow was watching from the corner again, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. You were someone's father once, she said. Rise looked up. No, just wanted to be. You're good with them. They give me something to carry. She didn't answer that, just looked down at her hands. He watched her for a while, how she stood, always standing, always holding herself like a door half closed. He thought about asking what her name was. He'd heard the children say Mama 100 times, but never anything more. But something in him said to wait. Let her give it when she was ready. You should sleep inside tonight, she said finally. I'm fine in the barn. I didn't ask if you were fine. He looked at her. Snowflakes drifted sideways past the window like ash. Thank you, he said. She stepped away from the wall, touched the curtain that separated the bedroom from the main room. There's a blanket chest beside the stove. Take 2. He did. That night he lay by the hearth, wrapped in woolen warmth and something else. Something new. The baby stirred once, but didn't cry. The boards creaked overhead as the house settled under the snow. The fire crackled soft and slow. He didn't sleep for a long while. Just listened. And for the first time in years he didn't feel like a man passing through. He felt paused, like maybe this was a place a man could stay. If he asked. If she let him. The thaw came sudden, like the land had decided it had enough of being cold. Snow shrank back into the earth, leaving behind mud thick as bread dough and the scent of wet cedar. Water dripped steady from the eaves. The children stomped through the yard in boots 2 sizes too big, laughing when they slipped, crying when they hit the ground. Then laughing again. Breeze stood at the back fence with a bucket of nails, sleeves rolled, and sweat on his neck, despite the chill still in the air. Nathaniel hammered beside him, more sure of his swing now. Still rough but learning. You get tired of this yet? Rise asked. The boy shook his head. No, sir. You will. Some days. But it still needs doing. Nathaniel glanced at him. You ever want to leave? Rise leaned against the post, rubbed his hand over the ache in his leg. Once. Didn't. Why not? He looked toward the cabin, toward the open window where the curtain moved like breath. Wasn't ready to start over. Not yet. Nathaniel nodded, slow, thinking hard. He didn't speak again, just hammered. Inside, the widow wiped the table clean with strong, sure strokes. Her hands were red from scrubbing, knuckles cracked. She hummed under her breath, sometimes low, tuneless. The baby sat in the corner near the fire, gumming a wooden spoon content. Lena was sewing badly. But Rise had told her once, every stitch is just a mark that says you kept going. So she did. When the sun dipped low, Riz came in with dirt on his hands and a cut across his forearm from a barbed nail. She saw it before he spoke, took his arm gently and led him to the basin. You're not careful, she said, not unkind. I was watching the boy. Watch your own blood, too. She cleaned it with salt water. He winced, didn't pull back. You ever sew a man up before? He asked. More than once. Your husband? She nodded. He came back torn more than he went out. Riz looked at her. He was lucky. Her eyes flicked to his sharp and sudden. No, he wasn't. Silence filled the room. The baby dropped the spoon and it clattered on the floor. She bandaged the wound, tied it off with rough cloth. Her fingers lingered just a breath longer than needed. Then she let go. I made stew again, she said. Better this time. He smiled. I'd believe that. That night after the children had gone quiet, Riz sat by the hearth sharpening his knife. She moved through the room behind him, slow and steady, gathering cups, folding blankets. The fire cracked low. Wind moved outside, but it no longer howled. "I've been thinking," she said. He waited. "This place, it won't hold another year without help." He looked up. "I know. I don't mean just nails and fence posts. I mean someone who doesn't leave." She was standing near the window, arms crossed, eyes not meeting his. It wasn't a question. Not yet. Just truth dropped like a stone between them. He set the knife aside. "I don't want to leave." She turned toward him. "But I've never stayed." She nodded as if that answer didn't surprise her. "Then you're staying now?" "For now." "For now," she repeated, quiet. He stood cross to her, slow, not close, just enough so she didn't have to raise her voice. "I can't promise what I haven't learned how to give yet," he said. "But I'm here, and I want to keep being here." Her shoulders eased just a little. She studied him like the land studied rain, hoping but not counting on it. "I need someone who won't leave just because it gets hard. I've left enough to know it don't fix much." They stood in silence. Then, as if something had finally given way inside her, she said, "My name's Claire." He nodded, slow. "Claire." She looked at him for a long time. Then, without another word, she turned and walked to the back room. The curtains swayed after her. He stayed at the hearth a while longer, the warmth soaking into him like something earned. Outside, the stars blinked wide and slow. The night no longer felt like something to get through. It felt like something to be inside of. The weeks bled forward, soft and sure, the way a stream cuts into stone, not fast but without stopping. Spring came in fits. Cold in the morning, warm by mid-afternoon. Snow one day, birdsong the next. The creek filled again, shallow but running. That mattered. Claire moved different now. Not softer exactly, but less like she was bracing for something to strike. She still wore the same worn dress, most days still rose before the sun, still ran the house like a woman holding back collapse with her bare hands. But her voice had changed. It had weight, yes, but sometimes, when the children laughed, she let the corners of her mouth lift. Not a smile, not fully, but close. Rise saw it, saw all of it. He'd wake early, splitting kindling before the frost had let go, boots crunching over frozen ground. He built up the fence, dragged stones from the field, patched the holes in the barn roof where starlight had once come through. He taught Nathaniel how to sharpen a blade so it stayed sharp, showed Lena how to use a saddle needle without pricking her finger, held the baby once when Claire needed both hands and no one else was around. The boy never left his side now, not even for chores. Claire watched that too. One night after supper, Rise brought out something wrapped in burlap, laid it on the table with care. "What is it?" Nathaniel asked. Rise unwrapped it. Inside was a piece of cedar, hand-carved, oiled smooth. A tool handle half-shaped. "I figured we'd make something together," he said. "Start with this." The boy picked it up, turned it in his hands like it was gold. "For what?" "A draw knife. Maybe a chisel set if we get more wood." Claire said nothing, but she didn't look away. Later, after the kids had gone to sleep and the fire was low, she sat beside Riz without a word. They watched the coals settle. His leg throbbed from the long day, but he didn't mind. "You give them more than food," she said. He nodded. "They gave me something first." She turned to him. Her eyes were dark, serious, searching. What? "Belonging," he said. She didn't speak, just looked at him like she understood exactly what that meant. After a long pause, she asked, "Did you ever have a woman before?" "One," he said. "Years back. Texas hill country. Her name was Ruth. We were young. She wanted roots. I wanted the trail. And now, I want a place where someone's waiting for me at the end of the day." Her eyes dropped to the floor, then back to him. "You'd stay?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't need saving," she added, quick. "I know that. You already did the hard part." "What part's that?" "Surviving." A silence opened between them, deep but not empty. "You're not like other men," she said. "I'm trying not to be." She stood cross to the table and poured 2 cups of weak coffee. Handed him one. Her hand brushed his light as smoke. Then she sat again, close enough their shoulders nearly touched. "You stay through summer," she said. He sipped. "All right. If you leave after that, I won't." She looked at him. "Don't say it unless it's true." "I won't," he repeated. "I've done all the leavin' I plan to." Outside wind stirred the grass. The house creaked and settled. The fire whispered down to embers. She reached for his hand, not fast, not dramatic, just placed her fingers over his like a woman finally letting herself rest. He didn't move. They sat that way until the lamp went out, the only light left coming from the heart of the coals. Summer came with dust and long light. The fields dried into gold, and the children ran barefoot through the grass, their laughter trailing behind like wind through wheat. The house no longer felt like a shelter held together by will alone. It breathed now, still quiet, still tired, but full of something steady. Riz worked from sunup to after supper most days. He and Nathaniel built a shed near the barn, one wall open to the wind, stacked neat with wood and old iron. He taught the boy how to plane cedar smooth, how to notch corners that held without nails. They moved together like they'd been doing it for years. Claire watched from the porch sometimes, never long, just enough. When the baby began to walk, first steps wide and wobbly, Rise was the one who caught him before he hit the floor. The boy giggled like thunder. Rise lifted him high, and Claire, behind the stove, turned away just long enough to blink something off her lashes. At night they sat closer. Sometimes her hand found his. Sometimes his shoulder found hers. They didn't talk much after the children went to sleep. Didn't need to. The silence was no longer made of grief. It was peace. Hard won and quiet. But peace never held forever. The letter came by Ryder, folded tight and dusted with trail. It bore no return name, just Riss's, written in a hand he hadn't seen in years. Claire found him at the fence line, hammer mid-swing. She held it out, said nothing. He took it, turned it over once, twice, then tucked it into his coat pocket and kept working. That night he read it by lantern in the barn, sitting on a stool beside the tack wall. The handwriting was clean, deliberate, the message short. A brother's widow had passed, left behind a boy. No other kin, no money. The boy was 13, in Amarillo, waiting. Rise folded the letter slow. His fingers were shaking. He didn't go inside that night. In the morning, Claire stood at the stove waiting. She didn't ask, just looked at him with those eyes that had seen too much already. He held the letter out. "It's a nephew, my brother's son." She nodded once. "You going?" "I have to. I can't leave him alone." The words hung there. "For how long?" she asked. "I don't know." He waited for the hurt to come, the distance, the shutting down. But she just crossed the room, took the letter from his hand and folded it smaller. "Then go," she said. He blinked. "Claire, Claire, you're not the kind of man who walks away from a child. Not anymore." He looked at her, the strength in her face, the steadiness in her voice. And he knew what it cost her to say that. "I'll bring him back," he said. Her mouth twitched like a smile might come, but didn't. "You better," she said. Nathaniel stood in the doorway, arms folded. "You'll need help with the horse," he said. Rise nodded. "Come on, then." They saddled the bay and packed light. Claire handed him a bundle of bread, salt, and jerky, a jar of boiled eggs. She touched his arm as she gave it over, just to press, but it said more than words ever could. "You come back whole," she said. He nodded, throat tight. She stepped back. The children waved. The baby clapped. Lena ran after the horse and handed Riz a red ribbon to keep you safe, she said. He tied it to the saddle horn. Then he rode. Dust rose behind him, curling in the morning sun. Claire stood in the doorway until the speck of him disappeared over the hill. The house was quiet again, but not empty. And when the wind stirred the curtains that evening, it didn't sound like grief anymore. It sounded like a promise. Riz returned 12 days later. They heard the horse before they saw it, hoofbeats slow and steady, approaching from the ridge that marked the edge of their land. Claire was at the stove when Nathaniel threw open the door, eyes wide. He didn't shout, didn't say a word, just looked at her like something he'd stopped hoping for had come back. She wiped her hands on her apron and stepped outside. There he was. Dust-covered, sun-worn, tired down to the bone, but sitting tall in the saddle, a boy riding behind him. The child looked skinnier than Nathaniel, same age maybe, but his eyes were older. Riz had his arm around the boy, steadying him as if to say, "You're not alone anymore." Claire stepped off the porch and walked out into the yard. She didn't run. She didn't smile. Riz dismounted, slow, legs stiff from the ride, then reached down to help the boy down. The child hesitated, then took his hand. "This is Eli," Riz said. "My nephew." Claire crouched slightly, met the boy's eyes. "You hungry?" He nodded, quick and small. "Then come in." Eli looked at Riz, who gave him a gentle pat on the back. He followed Claire toward the house, quiet and cautious, boots too big for his feet. Nathaniel stood off to the side, arms crossed. Riz came to him last. "You did good while I was gone?" Riz asked. Nathaniel shrugged, but his jaw clenched. "I missed it," he said. "Working with you. I missed it too." They stood a moment longer. Then the boy said quieter, "You staying for good now?" Riz looked toward the cabin where Claire's shape moved inside, where a child not his own had waited, and another now sat at the table. "I am," he said. "If they'll have me." Nathaniel nodded. "They will." Inside the house was full of noise, of footsteps, of warmth. Claire poured stew into a bowl and set it in front of Eli. Lena offered him her spoon. The baby reached for his coat sleeve with sticky hands. He didn't pull away. Riz stood near the door watching. Claire glanced up. Their eyes met across the small space between stove and table. "You get him here safe," she said. "I did." "You staying?" He nodded. "If you'll let me." She didn't answer right away, just dried her hands and crossed to him. "I didn't keep this place going so I could survive alone," she said. Riz reached into his coat pocket, pulled something wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it gently and placed it in her hand, a silver wedding band, dull with time, smoothed at the edges. "It was my mother's," he said. "I kept it. Couldn't wear it. Not until I knew where home was." Claire turned the ring over in her palm. The children were quiet now, watching. "You sure?" she asked. "I've never been more." She nodded once, slow, then slid the ring onto her finger where it rested like it had always belonged there. Outside, wind stirred the grass again. Not the sound of grief, not the sound of waiting, but of roots taking hold, of something built, not just endured. That night the house didn't creak alone. It breathed, deep, warm, and full of life. A family sat around the table. A man once broken, now steady. A woman once alone, now strong with love. Children who had lost much, now with more than they could hold. And in the center of it all, a fire burned, not for warmth, but for light. Subscribe and walk the line where survival meets hope.